It's Christmas. Yes, happy Christmas. I'm sure you've got plenty of things planned today. I'm sure you've got the family coming round, all those sorts of things, Christmas dinner, whatever you've got planned. I just want to say happy Christmas. But maybe you're taking a little bit of time out of your day today to watch my fragrance video. If you are, what are you doing with yourself? But what are we going to talk about today? Well, I want to keep it nice and short and sweet because I'm sure you want to get on with your festivities. So I am at my computer and essentially I want to look at some more history of fragrances. I did one the other week where I spoke about leather being such a divisive fragrance note, and obviously being in the Christmas spirit today, I wanted to talk about a couple of notes, well, three notes in particular today that are related to Christmas and they're in fragrances. So the ones we're going to look at today is pine, we're going to look at cinnamon, we're going to look at red wine and just see how they've been utilised in fragrances, the history, when they were first used, what they're made up of, because obviously you don't tip cinnamon in a fragrance bottle. That wouldn't be very nice and it would clog up the atomizer. And yeah, just any news stories around them, any sort of history that we can find, or anything that's in the modern trends of this fragrance note. What can we find? So I've got ChatGPT, of course, to help me with that. We are going to start with pine. So yeah, let's not wait around any longer. Let's get on with it. Essentially, I asked ChatGPT, can you give me a very simple bullet point background of the history of pine in fragrances and perfumery? They went, sure, here's a simple, clear bullet point background on the history of pine in fragrances and perfumery. So a little bit more in depth than I thought. Leather, I kind of expected a little bit more of a background, but pine was quite an interesting one. So you see it on the screen now as well. But ancient use. Pine resin from various pinus species was burned as incense in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome for its cleansing and purifying scent. Sometimes scents in the past have been burnt almost to get rid of demons and scare them off from ghosts in your house. This one, though, it sounds like it was very much cleansing, maybe a little bit medicinal, maybe, used to help heal rather than to scare things away, scare spirits away. Traditional medicine, so here we go. Pine needles, resins and oils were used in folk remedies across Europe and Asia, contrary to its association with freshness and well-being. So yeah, it sounds like it was obviously used in ancient Egypt, and Europe and Asia continued that treatment, essentially using it as medicine, clean, purifying, freshness, well-being, all those sort of satisfying, refreshing scents and profiles that we look for in fragrances. 19th century perfumery, so we go into perfumery a bit more here. With the rise of modern perfumery, pine essential oil became a common ingredient in colognes and hygiene products because of its bright, sharp, clean aroma. I definitely agree with that. 19th century, particularly those old school masculine fragrances, pine was a very popular note. You recognise them a lot. Pinot Sylvester, one of the strongest that I can think of, and the ones I've owned anyway. Early 20th century, pine notes became central in fougere and aromatic fragrance families, often paired with lavender, herbs, and mossy notes. I think in recent times, pine particularly, it's not the standout showman type note. It's the one that sits in the background that gives that fougere, that barbershop vibes, if you don't know what fougere means. And I actually quite like it now, particularly oak moss. I love oak moss in fragrances. With a bit of pine combining with that, I think it's absolutely great. So yeah, it's certainly been toned down a little bit. Household products influence. The widespread use of pine in cleaning products, especially mid-20th century, shaped public perception of pine as clean, influencing how perfumers used it. I think that's really important though. What we need to remember though is it can go, and it's a very fine line between household cleaner type smell and smells like a fragrance. And yes, sometimes pine can go that little, yeah, the lines can be blurred, so you've got to get it right if you're a perfumer doing it. And some of the best ones I've had, I don't even know if it's pine so much in it. I don't know if it's fir resin, similar sort of thing anyway. But in Burberry London, it's just got that lovely piney smell. As does Yognog as well by Lush Body Spray. Two that really do it well. Modern niche perfumery, so niche a little bit more, yeah, not as mainstream essentially. Contemporary perfumers use pine in more nuanced ways, evoking forest, winter, alpine ale, resinous, coniferous atmospheres, often blending it with incense, woods, and smoke. Yes, so when I've had green type fragrances, whether it's been pine in it specifically, you do get that kind of outdoorsy type scent, that lumberjack vibe. Walking through a pine forest. Guardian of the Forest by Lush is probably the best one that replicates that type of smell. But when I used to work in outdoor sport jobs, I would wear the Jaguar, the green Jaguar fragrance, really strong on the pininess. Not a massive fan of it. Jeffrey Bean Bowling Green was the other one I owned. Can be a little bit old school smell, like a little bit like an old man, but it also can make you feel a little bit macho and quite bracing on a cold day. A green fragrance when you're outside, walking, hiking, whatever you're doing, is quite pleasant. So yeah, and the performance of them are very good. Current trends. Growing interest in naturalistic and outdoor inspired scents has renewed appreciation for pine, fir, and other conifer notes. I hope that's how you pronounce it. In high-end and something fragrances. Apologies, I don't want to butcher any words. So essentially, yeah, nature-inspired fragrance notes have grown a lot, and Hermes, I think, are the best at it. Not They don't focus too much on the green side from the ones I've owned. They do make it nice and fruity with those more orange citrus scents. But yeah, they're fantastic. You know, pine fragrances are fantastic. You just got to get it right. I don't know if Cologne Club has it, but again, in that green barbershop fougere type fragrance, it can be old school, can be quite macho. But if you tone your sprays down, wear it in the right situation, people will only say good things about it. So we're going to go on now to what molecules make the pine smell. Do they just put pine needles in it? Of course they don't. So if I thought it was hard a minute ago to pronounce some words, the molecules that are in these fragrances to replicate that pine fir smell, probably going to be just as hard. So these are the main aroma molecules responsible for the pine smell in nature and perfumery. I assume that means alpha pinene. The dominant component in many pine needle oils smell sharp, resinous, classic pine. So maybe when you get those old school pine smells, it's that pinene. That's how you pronounce it. Essentially, that's what it is, though. So it gives you that old school barbershop type vibe. Alpha male, macho man, maybe someone who's dressed in like a check shirt, and yeah, ripped jeans, all those sort of things with an axe over their shoulder. And then you've got this beta, I assume it is, or B-pinene, slightly greener and less sharp than A-pinene, adds a crisp, herbal, coniferous nuance. So maybe that's what we're getting more in modern fragrances, that slightly softer, maybe slightly more minty type smell with fragrances. I feel like a lot of green fragrances now almost have more of a toothpastey menthol smell, even if they've got pine in, whereas in the past it was much more like peppery green. And maybe that's just that change of molecule that they're using. Limonene, we've heard about this. This is in many fragrances, many toothpaste products, all those sorts of things. Adds a bright citrus factor that often appears in pine oils, supports freshness and lift. So yeah, this is more of the citrus that complements the aggressive green notes and maybe does give it that zesty pepperiness that I just mentioned. So bornyl acetate, one of the most important pine ester notes in perfumery, smells camphorous. Is that right? Doesn't matter. The C word we care about today is Christmas. Woody, sweet, resinous, and balsamic, gives a polished aromatic pine feeling. So it's obviously one that's used a lot. I haven't actually seen that in any of the ingredients I've looked at in the past. I will look out for that one now and see if we can find it. I assume that says canthine. Fresh, cool, slightly minty resinous notes. So maybe this is more what it is. Wild Mint by Azzaro, one of the absolute best for that. Really gives you that mentholy vibe. And I can't get enough of it. I really can't. And Dirty by Lush, another one that's brilliant. Recommend it. Tarragon's in that, which can be a bit divisive, but really nice. Works as a secondary pine terpene. Or terpene. Anyway, so basically that more freshness. That's what you want. I really like that minty freshness that you can get with green accords, much more than those old school ones. And then terpinolene. Terpinolene? I think I pronounced that one right. Woody herbal, sweet pine nuance, adds complexity and roundness. So maybe that note there is one that just, sometimes you can get quite harsh green notes that can almost burn your nostrils and just be a little bit aggressive. Maybe that's what you need. Woods are very good at that in general. Maybe that's what that one does, saying it's a woody, sweet pine nuance, bit of sweetness. I think that's great. Also some synthetic pine notes used in perfumery. So isobornyl acetate, so a little bit the same. The only thing I can see is that it's got iso in front of it. A clean, sweet, polished pine, often used in soaps and not fragrances specifically. And then you've got terpendiol, terpenyl derivatives. I can't pronounce that word. Provide clean, crisp pine lavender notes. Yeah, lavender, again, I really like lavender in fragrances. And actually, lavender and pine gives you that naturalistic type vibe. And that's really what that synthetic note's trying to do. And then Veramoss or Vertinex, fresh woody coniferous notes used to modernise pine impressions. So again, talking about maybe more that oak mossy vibe, I'm guessing from that Veramoss or Veramoss. That's what I prefer, that more barbershop shaving cream type vibe. If anyone's had like those aloe vera shaving creams, I feel like that's where pine is pretty much in modern perfumery. But let's see if there's any stories, any pine stories we can find. Okay, there's one story that I really like, and I believe I mentioned this a long time ago. Now, I didn't know what a fatberg was until a little while ago. Apparently, it's something that almost like clogs up the drains. It's like gunk, it's dirt, essentially. But they've basically talked about this Scottish university, anyway, So it says Scotch Union reveals shocking new perfume with disgusting ingredient. Uniboffins have created a stink by turning fatbergs into fancy fragrances. So yeah, they're sewage blockages essentially that are non-biodegradable. So things like wet wipes, they're terrible for those things. And you see that a lot with these anti-bac wipes. They're really clogging up a lot of areas. And then what it says here, but biochemists have created an ingenious way of turning disgusting into delightful with sweet-smelling pine perfumes. So not many people realise that everyday products they currently use are made from oil. Both oil and fatbergs are made from carbon-based chemicals. And so all we're doing is making their cosmetics from another source and cleaning up the environment at the same time. So essentially, the oil and fatbergs that are used in everyday products, they're basically mixing it with pine. They're using pine fragrances with these fatbergs to essentially give you the same thing, just replicate what the oil does. Very bizarre, but if you don't know any different, I don't mind it. If someone said to me, this is a fatberg oil thing you're rubbing on your skin, I probably wouldn't like it. But if it's being used and you don't notice any differences, no issues around safety, efficacy, go for it. I don't mind, let's be honest. Who would have thought that you spray fragrances that have got butyl benzo blah, blah, blah in it? You just do it, don't you, anyway, and you just hope it's safe. Just very quickly on pine, famous pine fragrances, Pinot Sylvester 1955, one I've owned, barbershop classic. Really recommend that one. It's super cheap, but it's divisive, but I think it's one that even if you don't like it, you'll appreciate it. It's very old school. It's 80, 70 years old even. Karen Yataghan, I've heard of that one. Don't know anything about it, but it says it's a leather and pine needle, so this sounds like a very alpha male, a cult favourite. Dark wild, almost feral, so I'm thinking that's very animalic. Ralph Lauren, polo green, again, tobacco, leather. And you're looking at the dates of these, they're old school fragrances on the whole. Drakkar Noir, again, a fragrance I've not owned myself. I've smelt it a couple of times. I feel like leather jacket. And then Halston or Halston Z14, 1976. A warm pine citrus, cinnamon and woods, a vintage masculine with a sparkling pine top. So that one there, maybe not the complete standout part of the fragrance, but certainly gives you that uplifting opening. There's a few modern ones I'll just mention. Comme des Garçons Wonderwood in 2010. It says it's not strictly pine, but includes clear pine, conifer, resin tones. And that's what I feel. I think pine's taken a step back, essentially, in modern perfumery, whereas in the past it used to be the real centrepiece because it showed you were a lumberjack, strong, tough man. Anyway, we're going to go on to cinnamon now. To cinnamon, again, in modern times, when you think of luxury and notes, again, you think of things like leather car seats. You know, there's certain things, certain notes, whether it's smells or whatever, that makes you smell expensive. Sometimes boozy notes can as well, and just that element of social standing. Let's be honest, that's what happened from ancient times. And in the past, spices were those sorts of things as well. Spices were a real commodity. You know, when we look at the early Tudor period, if you had these spices, you know, they were being shipped abroad, shipped into the country. They were just a big deal. Cinnamon was obviously one. So ancient to early use. Cinnamon was cherished as a luxury spice in ancient times, prized in ancient Egypt for incense and perfumes, often used in ritual and sacred aromatics. So again, there's a slight religious element as well to it. It's mentioned in early medical and ritual tests and was considered valuable as gold in some cultures. Unbelievable to think that, but that's what I was trying to say. Spices in the past were a big deal. Big deal, and it showed that social standing of where you were. Medieval and Renaissance, cinnamon was used in pomanders. We said these were like scent bags, and spice blends carry or worn to mask odours, there you go, and believed to ward off disease. So here again, more of a health benefit, essentially, or what they thought would prevent, you getting ill, was just smelling of this spice. In Renaissance Europe, cinnamon's association with luxury meant it featured in perfumes that emphasised exotic and costly ingredients. Imagine that, spending so much money on a fragrance because it has cinnamon in. I think I'll do that now. I'll definitely do that now. Modern perfumery, with steam distillation and later chemical analysis, identifying cinnamon. Perfumers began isolating using cinnamon's aroma compounds with greater precision from the 19th century onward. Let's try and pronounce that properly. Cinnamaldehyde. I actually think I might have got that right. So, in 20th century Western perfumery, cinnamon became a significant spice note in amber oriental spicy compositions. Famous spice classics like Estee Lauder Cinnabar, Yves Saint Laurent Opium, and others have highlighted cinnamon's warmth and sensuality. So there we go. Interesting. It says about the strength of it. Synthetic ones can be quite strong. People are very sensitive to it. And the thing I'd say with cinnamon, which I think is really important, is it can be quite aggressive. It's a gourmand note, but it can be super aggressive. I've got one called Cacao Square. The cinnamon is really strong, and maybe that's what they're saying now. Is sometimes these synthetic notes can be a bit too much. You've got to be really careful. You've got to dial back your sprays sometimes because it will just choke you out. Let's have a look at the molecules that make up that smell of cinnamon in fragrances. So cinnamaldehyde was the first one we spoke about. This is the defining cinnamon molecule from cinnamon bark oil. It's got hot, spicy, sweet, slightly metallic, and it's only used in tiny amounts. So yeah, this is obviously one that's a real, if you want it to be the showpiece note, cinnamon in your fragrance, that sounds like one that you'll use. And then cinnamol alcohol is softer and less sharp. So maybe this is what you get in the sort of more opening of a fragrance potentially. Maybe the cinnamaldehyde maybe is one that you get in the sort of base to make it last longer. The smell of the cinnamol alcohol is warm, slightly balsamic, slightly floral, often used to round cinnamon. So yeah, just to make the fragrance feel a little bit more rounded, less aggressive. And then cinnamol acetate, sweet, fruity, spicy version of cinnamon adds smoothness and elegance. So I'm thinking with that, maybe that's more of a, I'd probably say some of the 1 Million line potentially do that a little bit. I think 1 Million Lucky or 1 Million Privé, they were both along those lines, which, you know, they're in the background. But cinnamon's very popular in those ones in particular. So I think we should go on to the last one then. We're going to go on to red wine. I'm sure some of you will be looking forward to a bit of wine with your dinner or with your cheese and biscuits later on. Now, as you can probably imagine, there isn't really a lot about how wine and red wine was used in fragrances. But again, if we go back to what I was interested in, British history, they didn't really drink a lot of water. There actually used to be these wine fountains essentially in the streets, almost like the river that was running through would almost just be filled with wine. They used to just drink wine over water because water was obviously not safe. It had a lot of disease-riddled things in it. People were getting ill from it. So alcohol and wine was actually what people used to drink more of. And again, it just showed that level of social standing. So if you were a king or a queen, you'd have access to it. And maybe you're more peasants, which they were called a lot of them at the time, maybe they didn't have access to it. But what did I find in terms of historical context? Well, unlike cinnamon, red wine isn't directly extracted like a plant essential oil. That's the thing. Some of these fragrances, again, I've got my Lush ones next to me. They've got all these natural oil in it in green, which they've just been extracted from an original thing. So it's not a synthetic. However, this one doesn't sound like it so much. So it says, and wine fragrances are typically accords constructed with blends of fruity, tannic, and warm notes to evoke wine's character rather than using raw wine. So yeah, obviously wine being a liquid, maybe you think, oh, could it be using it? It's an alcohol note. You know, perfume is alcohol's a thing in fragrances, but obviously not. It looks like it's been very much, the smell of it's been replicated with the use of other oils and synthetic molecules. So perfume culture and wine production have long interlinked in olfactory imagination, both rich in complex aromatics, but wine as a scent though is a modern creative idea in perfuming more than a historical traditional raw material. So again, it's much more of a modern smell having boozy notes, and you don't really get them in old school French, which I find weird because drinking culture has always been a popular thing. So yeah, really interesting. It says some perfumers incorporate wine or accords similar, often using synthetic wine-like materials or blends of fruit, tannin, and boozy facets to impart a rich, deep, and velvety nuance. These wine accords are found in select niche and artistic fragrances. Wine notes are usually middle or base elements to evoke essential, mellow, slightly alcoholic quality, imbued with rich fruit and warmth. Yeah, I think when I've seen boozy, not necessarily saying wine, but obviously port wines in Burberry London, which I mentioned earlier, typical Christmas scent. It's not the standout thing. You don't want to smell, and it can be really a fine line. You don't want to smell like you've been drinking, but you want that boozy note to smell that slightly higher standard of French. Lost cherry, obviously it's not a wine note, but that cherry liqueur makes you smell expensive. It doesn't make you smell like you've been drinking. It just smells like a quality note. In terms of stories for cinnamon and wine, there isn't a lot. There really, really isn't a lot. Just saying that cinnamon fragrances are still very, very popular. And cinnamon in fragrances are being reimagined, with it being integrated with deeper elements like woods and incense. But wine hasn't got so much. You know, it's just used, but it's used in combination with other notes, and it just sits in the background, maybe just to smooth fragrances off. But it's not a standout note in fragrances, and there's not a lot of headlines about how it's being used, other than maybe in like a nice sort of cocktail mojito type fragrance. And that really, I believe, is everything. Is there anything I have missed with that? Doesn't look like it. So that is everything for today. Really interested about pine and the different synthetic notes and the natural oils coming from that. And I like pine in fragrances. Maybe this year we'll try and find some more pine fragrances. Let me know if there's any that you recommend, particularly modern ones, because I feel like it's one that's easing back a little bit. I'd like it to have a bit of a renaissance and just modernise to give you that fougere barbershop vibe. But yes, I think the last thing I need to say today, happy Christmas. If you did watch me waffling on this morning before you have your Christmas dinner, thank you very much. I can't wait. Pigs in blankets. Oh, I love pigs in blankets. But you know what I'm looking forward to more than anything? My nan's trifle. She makes the best trifle. So I'm going to get down and eat it before anyone else gets there. Thank you for watching today. Happy Christmas. I'll catch you later.